Today, we are extremely honored and so proud to have our guest speaker of the LaSalle County veterans, whose name is on the wall. The plaque represents the Vietnam era. One of our distinguished veterans who had an incredible military career, Major James Frank Hinkel. He graduated from Cotulla High School in 1960. He went to the United States Air Force Academy, where he graduated as a second lieutenant in 1965. He was assigned to Laughlin Air Force Base in Del Rio, and there he completed his Air Force pilot training in 1965. He initially flew KC-135 tankers at Griffith Air Force Base, New York. He then transitioned to small helicopters in Vietnam in 1969. After several staff jobs, he checked out in the C-141 airlifter. His last flight was in a KC-135 in 1995. During the general's career, he was a commander 4 times. A squadron, the 30th Military Airlift Squadron, 2 wings, 41st Rescue and Weather Reconnaissance Wing, and the 437th Military Airlift Wing, and Air Division, the 834th Airlift Division, Military Airlift Command. General Hinkel was assigned to the Pentagon 3 times, and in one of those assignments he served as the executive officer to the Air Force Chief of Staff. Major General Hinkel retired from his military career in 1995. We are truly honored to have him here today, and please give me LaSalle County welcome.
Well, I appreciate very much the introduction, and I really appreciate the invitations. I've been looking forward to doing this for some time, and it's been an education for me to sort through some ideas to talk about today. So I guess it's appropriate I say something about the rain. I think I feel just like everyone else does, is as hard to come by as rain is, it's okay. And as you've heard, I spent the vast majority of my adult life in the military, and some of you may realize, but that really wouldn't have happened without the help of one of my high school teachers, Mrs. Fred Adobe. I think most of you knew her. She was our counselor, and she suggested that I apply for the then new Air Force Academy. And then she followed up and made sure I did. Remember, I was a teenager at the time, so. I was accepted for the Academy's 6th class, the class of 1964, and without her pushing me, my life would have been much different. Thank you. We're here to, as several people before me have said, is to recognize veterans of the various wars that are LaSalle County residents, and especially World War II, Korea and Vietnam. And I remember the World War II veterans best because I knew some of them personally. And the previous listing that was on the wall that came down is now across the street at the museum, has a great number of names. And if you have been over to check out the military section in the museum, you know how many people from this county went to war, how many of our sons went to war. I had 4 brother-in-laws that served. 2 were not from LaSalle County, but 2 were. One was Kenneth Gabert, and he was a B-29 crew member and was all completed and ready to go, and the war ended. And the other was Ralph Baker, who's sitting right here on the front. And he was signed up for the Navy in 1942 when he got out of high school. And he served, luckily, in the Caribbean in the anti-sub area. I talked with Ralph a lot about World War II. And one thing I remember him telling me, and it just stuck in my mind, is he talked about one day he was on the West Coast, and all the bosses told all the recruits, put on your best outfit. shine up your shoes, and when they got down to wherever they marched up, there was FDR, the president, and I can't forget that. I could envision him sitting there in the back of that convertible with his cigarette sticking straight up, with a big smile on his face. War took many of our people from the safe little county here in LaSalle County and put us in a much bigger world that wasn't safe. And we not only left LaSalle County, many of us left the United States, and we ended up in combat in a foreign world. Veterans Day originally began when President Woodrow Wilson spoke on November 11th, 1919, a year after the end of World War I. And his goal was to remember the end of that war a year prior. You all probably remember that the war ended, World War I ended on the 11th hour, the 11th day, 11th month of 1918. Exactly 100 years ago today. The only thing, we're an hour and a half late. He declared the day Armistice Day and dedicated it to those who died bringing World War I victory. Let me quote him. To us in America, the reflections of Armistice Day will be filled with solemn pride in the heroism of those who died in the country's service. And the Congress ultimately made November 11th a national holiday, calling it Armistice Day initially, and in 1954 it became Veterans Day, and today it's a day that we honor all current and past members of the military. I want to talk more about Veterans Day, but I want to first relate a wartime story that's much closer to this time. It was 9 years ago in Afghanistan. I want to take us to Combat Operating Outpost Keating, COP Keating, Keating, in northeast Afghanistan, nearly into Pakistan. COP Keating was a small, rugged outpost, a collection of buildings of concrete, plywood, trenches, and sandbags, which sounds like Vietnam to me, although I don't remember much concrete. But I think some of y'all remember that too. It was one of the most remote posts in Afghanistan. It sat at the bottom of a steep valley surrounded by mountains. It was essentially a place where insurgents would have ideal coverage. Insurgents. The attack came in the morning of October 3rd, 2009, just as the sun rose. Many of the people were still asleep, and soon the awful odds became clear. More than 300 Taliban were attacking and surrounding 53 soldiers. 300 to 53, 6-to-1 odds. In addition to the high ground advantage, the attackers were unleashing everything they had. Rocket-propelled grenades, heavy machine guns, mortars, snipers taking aim, and from every direction. The Americans initially pulled back to buildings that were easier to defend and to make one last stand. And at the time, some people likened this to the Alamo. Keating, it seemed, was going to be overrun. The Americans fought their way back and stormed one building after another, pushing the enemy away, having actually to shoot up at the enemy up on the top of the mountains. By now, most of the camp was on fire, and amid the flames and the smoke, the camp called in air power, airstrikes. They were in contact with an F-15, which operated as an air controller for the air attacks. And they even included a B-1 bomber, a nuclear bomber, that happened to be airborne overhead. Its precision bombs, not nuclear, made the earth shake all around them. Thank goodness the Taliban hadn't planned on this. Over the radio, they heard comrades who were pinned down in a Humvee within the post. The Americans unloaded everything they had at the enemy positions, and with that cover, the 3 wounded Americans escaped back to safety. But there were more Americans still needing help. So the soldiers started charging through the enemy fire. They kept charging 50 meters, 80, 100 meters under a hail of bullets, and they reached their fallen friends and brought them home. The question has often been asked, why do those in uniform take such extraordinary risks, show such courage? They fight for our country and for our freedom. They fight to come home to their families. But most of all, they fight for each other. They look out for each other. They have to protect each other's backs. That's just the way it works. The fight lasted 12 hours, and 8 members of the American team lost their lives looking out for each other. But they won. Cop Keating remained in American hands. That brand of selfishness displayed again and again. Soldiers exposing themselves to enemy fire to pull a comrade to safety, tending to each other's wounds, and doing what was necessary to save the day. And if you seek a measure of that day, you need to look no further than the medals awarded. For sustained heroism, 37 Army Commendation Medals, 27 Purple Hearts. For valor, 18 Bronze Stars. For gallantry, 9 Silver Stars. 8 aviators received the Distinguished Flying Cross for helping defend the base. And Staff Sergeants Clinton Romachet and Ty Carter were awarded the Medal of Honor for action above and beyond the call of duty, our nation's highest award. These men were outnumbered, outgunned, and almost overrun. One of them said, I'm surprised we made it out. More than 40 soldiers are alive today to help make sure this country remains strong and free. What was it that turned the tide that day? How did so few Americans prevail? Clint Romachet, one of the Medal of Honor winners, said we just weren't going to get beat that day. We were going to win, plain and simple. Now I saw one Marine out there somewhere. There may be others. Any infantry out there? Must be somewhere. Anyway, my hat's off to the infantry. There's always been service members like those at Keating. We call them vets. The nation owes a great debt to its veterans whose service spans every era of our country's existence. Began in 1776. There was a sequel in 1812. In 1845, the Mexican-American War started largely because Texas was annexed. There was a Spanish-American War right before the turn of the century when the Maine blew up in Havana Harbor. There was World War I, II, Korea, Vietnam, and of course the 9/11 era, which we just talked about, and still going. Americans veterans provided the liberty that the founding fathers envisioned. Whenever and wherever this nation has fallen, America's veterans have been there. But we shouldn't forget that the purpose of war is peace. World War I produced our first effort at having international cooperation to solve the problems of war. That experiment continues today, and as you know, we're still well short of perfect results. But it does offer a hope that someday nations can live in harmony. Finally, we must remember that all who died for our country were victims of a peace process that failed. A peace process where we forgot things. For instance, the surest way to keep the peace is to stay strong. Weakness, after all, is a temptation for those looking to start a fight to start one. On the other hand, strength is a condition that warns the belligerent that aggression will not be tolerated, that actions have consequences. In the end, the only way to maintain the peace is to be prepared to fight and to mean it. Our military is even now standing guard around the globe. Our naval forces are afloat everywhere. Ground forces are stationed at the hot spots throughout the world in Korea, Japan, Afghanistan, the Middle East. And in the Middle East, our military has been there almost continually since 9/11, again and again and again. Marines are also on board ship in the Atlantic and Pacific with combat units, and they are on a very short tether here in the United States. Air forces are dispersed around the world and ready for launch on a moment's notice to anywhere in the world, really. I'm comfortable with this presence, but it doesn't mean we should relax. The threat these days is terrorism from the Middle East, military and industrial threats from Asia, and of course there's Russia. They're now meddling in the Middle East and in the cyber area. I can think of no place I, as a military person, as an American citizen, and as a fellow veteran, that I'd rather be than today at this ceremony, even in this cold. It's very appropriate to celebrate Veterans Day here at the courthouse, where we honor today's veterans and the veterans of past U.S. wars. It's like we're in the honored presence of these veterans, many who gave their lives for our nation. I offer the thanks of a grateful nation to all veterans and to their families. A special word of thanks for the support they provided. Let us all depart with our heads held high, our spirits lifted, and with pride for what we've done to preserve the land of the free and the home of the brave. Ladies and gentlemen, a salute to our veterans. May God bless you.